and inspired to carry and live by the flame of human rights. So, today's proceedings are really the result of a joint venture between Constitution Hill, the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, and the South African Human Rights Commission and the United Nations. So I really wish to thank the entire team for the efforts that they have made to make today possible. But I'm also grateful to all of you for taking the time to be with us today. I would like to recognize some of our distinguished guests that are with us today. Allow me to, of course, recognize that we have Advocate Kholeka Gcaleka, the Public Protector of South Africa. We have a representative from the Commission on Human Rights with us today. We have Ms. Leah Mabusela, the CEO of Constitution Hill. We have Her Excellency, Ms. Joanne Doorneveld, Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. We have the resident coordinator, Mr. Nelson Mufu, and also a number of representatives from the United Nations in the room. I believe I saw UNHCR, UNFPA, and many other colleagues. The UN Global Compact is also with us here today. Thank you so much for taking the time, and to all the colleagues who are also online. I'd like to also recognize the DDG from the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, Mr. Charles Mohalaba. Thank you for being here. All members of the diplomatic corps that have made the time to be with us here. I recognize some of you in the audience that are here. Thank you for taking the time to be here. To our powerful conversation speakers, this is the part that you don't want to miss. Mr. Mark Haywood. Mark, it's great to see you again. Advocate Nasreen Rajab Budlinder, and Ms. Ketiwe Zulu. Thank you so much. But also to our civil society representatives and all human rights defenders that are in the room. Thank you. Thank you for celebrating this important moment with us. So on this International Human Rights Day, we of course come together to reaffirm a profound promise, the promise enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted 77 years ago. And this declaration was born out of the ashes of 2 world wars, the horrors of genocide and generations of colonial oppression. And I'd like to take a minute to actually show this document. So this declaration stands as humanity's moral compass. It sets out a common standard, a universal set of rights that every person, everywhere, is inherently entitled to. We are also here, though, because 29 years ago, South Africa's first democratically elected president, Nelson Mandela, signed the Constitution into law in Sharpeville, an act that anchored the country's transition to freedom and democracy. This Constitution, with its beautifully crafted Bill of Rights, which mirrors the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, established the Constitutional Court, the South African Human Rights Commission, and the Office of the Public Protector, institutions that we proudly mark as 30 years strong this year. I think that deserves a round of applause. But I also want to believe that we are not only here out of duty, but out of a profound love for and an unwavering commitment to human rights. For to love human rights is to love being human. As we gather, each of us is acutely aware of the many and sometimes glaring ways in which human rights remain unfulfilled. Inequality, poverty, discrimination, violence, and misinformation continue to widen fault lines across our region and the world. It is easy to despair, but it is precisely in moments like these that we must not lose hope. We must return to basics. That is why this year's global theme, Human Rights, Our Everyday Essentials, reminds us that human rights are not only essential, They are positive and attainable. So as this morning unfolds, we will honor those who have carried forward the promise of dignity, justice, and equality through law, through institutions, through public service, and through everyday courage. I would encourage all of you to be present and to be in the now. There are many reasons to get distracted, especially as we end this busy year. Another email, another text message, perhaps even a video. And I do apologize, I don't have any jokes in my repertoire, nor do I have any party tricks to share. I might leave that to you, Lukhona. But in all seriousness, what I do know is that we are in a sacred place. So choose to feel the presence of the eternal flame of democracy that burns bright at the entrance of the Constitutional Court, and the enduring legacy of those who sacrificed their liberty in this women's jail. I have no doubt that by the end of today, you will know why you chose to be here and why human rights matter. So before we get started, a few housekeeping issues. Let's start with the obvious. Phones off, please. Restrooms are located to my left, just outside the entrance. The emergency exits, if I still recall, are on my right. And also remember that today's proceedings will be live streamed. We will be taking photos and video footage during the event, so if any of you feel uncomfortable with your photo being taken, please make yourself known to my colleague Krivani at the back of the room. If you're using social media, please follow us and tag us on @OHCHR_SA, @VisitConHill, @SAHR Commission, and @DOJCD_ZA. Should you need any assistance at any point, our team is of course ready to help and on standby. So now I would like to invite you to please stand as we listen to the South African and African Union National Anthem.
To know the Lord say amen.
Thank you. You may be seated. I will now start by reading, we will now start the part where we will read the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Constitution of South Africa. In the interest of time, I will do the reading of the one from the Universal Declaration, and then that will follow with responsive reading of the Constitution. This Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations, to the end that every individual and every organ of society, keeping this declaration constantly in mind, shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universal and effective recognition and observance, both among the peoples of member states themselves and among the peoples of territories under their jurisdiction. Now let us read the preamble to the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa responsibly. So this time I will ask you to repeat after me. And you should be able to see the text on the screen. Okay, so hopefully you have good memories to be able to follow. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past. Honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land. Respect those who have worked to build and develop our country. And believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. United in our diversity, we therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values. Social justice and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society. In which government is based on the will of the people. And every citizen is equally protected by the law. Improve the quality of life of all citizens. And free the potential reach of each person. Build a united and democratic South Africa, able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. May God protect our people. Nkosi sikelele Africa. Murena buluka sichaba sa Yesu. God sien South Africa. God bless South Africa. Mudzimu Fatsucheza Afurika. Hosi Katikisa. Thank you. It was a bit long, but it's the purpose for why we are here. So now, dear friends, distinguished guests, our venue, Constitution Hill, is not just a venue. It was once the site of the old fort, the women's jail, and the notorious number 4 prison, where thousands were incarcerated under colonial and apartheid rule. Today, Constitution Hill stands transformed. It is home to the highest court of the land, a living museum, and a beacon of constitutional democracy. That transformation from prison to constitutional court embodies what human rights really mean: redemption, dignity, inclusion, and hope. So to begin our program, I would like to invite to the podium our host and the CEO of Constitution Hill, Ms. Leah Mabusela, to deliver her welcome remarks. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I promise I'm not being a delinquent by bringing my phone. It's just so I can reference my notes. Distinguished guests, Public Protector Advocate Kollega, UN Resident Coordinator Mr. Nelson Mufu, UN representatives, Ambassador of the Central African Republic, and Dean of the Diplomatic Corporations, His Excellency Mr. Andre Nzapayake, Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, also representing the Human Rights Forum, representing Her Excellency Ms. Joanne Doornavart, DDG Court Administration at the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, Mr. Charles Mohalaba, South African Human Rights Commission Commissioner Nomahlubi Kwinana, representative of Chapter 9 institutions, speakers, partners in civil society, friends and colleagues, good morning and welcome to the Constitution Hill. It's a profound honor to gather here at a place where history breathes, where memory lives, and where the future of our democracy continues to be shaped every day. Constitution Hill is not just a heritage site, and our program director has already said that. It's a home of the South African Constitution and the seat of our Constitutional Court, a global beacon of justice built on the hopes, sacrifices, and convictions of millions. This site is inscribed as a World Heritage Site under theme Human Rights, Liberation, and Reconciliation. Today we meet on a day of deep global national importance. 10 December marks International Human Rights Day, honoring the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. For South Africa, this day carries an additional meaning. It marks the anniversary of the signing of our Constitution, a transformative chapter that continues to guide us towards justice, equality, and freedom. This year also marks 30 years since the establishment of the Constitutional Court, the South African Human Rights Commission, and the Office of the Public Protector, 3 pillars designed to protect democracy and uphold the rule of law. These institutions were born of struggle, built to ensure that never again would dignity be a privilege for some rather than for all. But today is not only about looking back, it's also about looking forward to what is going to happen in 2026, a year that will stand as a milestone in our nation's democratic journey. For those who want to know, next year, South Africa celebrates 30 years of Constitution, 3 decades of rights, justice, and democratic practice. Constitution Hill will steward a nation year-long commemoration under the banner Constitutionalism in Action, 30 years of rights, justice, and democracy. Through learning, storytelling, arts, community organizations, and youth leadership, 2026 will be a year in which we reconnect with the Constitution, not as a document on the wall, but as a living guide for our daily life. A lot of our alpha generation keeps asking us, so what? You've got this constitution, we've got the history, and next year we are going to make sure that we involve them in our program so that they can start to steward and lead in making sure that this democracy that was fought for can continue. All roads will lead to a historic moment, the Light on the Hill Festival, from the 10th to the 12th of December 2026, a powerful national celebration of art, culture, memory, and democratic renewal. At the heart of the festival will be a ceremonial signing of the Bill of Rights, inviting the President of the country and the Chief Justice to reaffirm our nation's commitment to constitutionalism, just as President Nelson Mandela and Chief Justice Arthur Chaskalson did decades ago. This festival will honor the active artists of our past, spotlight our contemporary creators, and tell the story of our democracy through music, visual arts, dialogue, and collective imagination. Allow me to acknowledge our key partners who continue to work with us on this path: the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, the Constitutional Court of South Africa, the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the South African Human Rights Commission, the Public Protector South Africa, Outre, We the People SA. A lot of people would recognize it as the Constitutional Trust, the Human Rights Forum and diplomatic partners, and the many civil society organizations, artists, educators, youth leaders, institutions who continue to make constitutionalism real in the lives of our people. As we prepare for 2026, I extend a heartfelt invitation. Join us, partner with us, walk with us. Let us make this 30th anniversary not just a commemoration, but a national mobilization, a moment in which every South African renews their role as custodian of our democracy. For the Constitution lives when we live it. It endures when we teach it, debate it, defend it, and bring its promise to life in our homes, our schools, our communities, and our institutions. The next 30 years begins with the choices we make today. Thank you, and I wish us a powerful, inspiring program ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, for those wonderful remarks and getting us started, and especially your invitation to join you, to partner with you, and to work with you to bring the Constitution to life. My next speaker to deliver opening remarks is someone who holds the entire UN family together in South Africa. He is known for his unflinching commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals. He is a tireless believer, trust me, in people and planet, whose early career path orientated him towards research and advocacy on human rights. But he is also a brother and a fervent believer in unstoppable Africa. So please join me in welcoming our UN resident coordinator and representative of the UN Secretary General in South Africa, Mr. Nelson Mufu. You have the floor.
Well, thank you so much, my sister Abigail. Always a pleasure to walk this journey with you. And let me actually also acknowledge, of course, the CEO and our host of Constitution Hill, who you just heard from. I stand on existing protocol, but I must also acknowledge the public protector for her tireless work in ensuring integrity in everything that government and stakeholders do. Of course, of the Deputy Director General from the department, I acknowledge you and thank you, and my sister, Ambassador Joan, as well, and others from the Diplomatic Corps that are in the audience. But friends, partners, it is, I think, a real pleasure on behalf of the United Nations country team and the family here to join you at this gathering at Constitutional Hill, which really is a living home of South Africa's constitutional promise on this International Human Rights Day, a very befitting venue for a very important occasion. And today we recommit to the profound truth which is embedded at the heart of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that every human being is born free and equal in dignity and rights. And nearly 80 years on, that idea, forged from humanity's darkest lessons, yet written with hope, remains our North Star, especially when rights are being pushed back and things we assumed were part of the mainstream are being undermined across the world. And this year's theme, Human Rights Are Everyday Essentials, reminds us that rights are not abstract ideals. They are the essentials that allow people to live, grow, and thrive. And when communities face hunger, exclusion, insecurity, or violence, these are not just policy failures. These are failures to uphold basic rights. And here in South Africa, this message resonates deeply. On this day, as we've heard in 1996, Nelson Mandela Madiba intentionally signed the democratic constitution as the supreme law of the land. He chose this day to anchor the Rainbow Nation's renewal in universal human rights principles. That act was not a symbolic one. It was a profound statement that dignity, equality, freedom, and justice would define the future. And 29 years later, those values continue to inspire the world. The institutions that safeguard these values, including Chapter 9 bodies and the Public Protector's Office, remain critical guardians of democracy and accountability. They must be protected and strengthened. Friends, I speak today not only as the United Nations Resident Coordinator, but as someone whose life and work have been profoundly shaped by human rights. I named my son after Madiba, and he's sitting in the audience, because his legacy is personal to me. I have worked on human rights for years because I believe they are the foundation of peace, justice, and development. And across the world, we witness a narrowing of civic space, pushback, as I mentioned, against rights and humane values, alongside grave violations and a worrying indifference to human suffering. The Secretary General's message for today is clear, and indulge me because I'm going to read his full set of remarks. Nearly 80 years ago, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights defined that every person needs to survive and thrive. It was a philosophical and political breakthrough, and it has been the bedrock of our global community ever since. Human rights, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural, are inalienable, indivisible, and interdependent. But recent years have brought a shrinking of civic space. We have grave violations that signal a flagrant disregard for rights and a callous indifference to human suffering. Together, we have the power to confront these injustices by protecting the institutions that make human rights a lived reality. Every day, the United Nations helps people around the world realize their most basic rights. Together with civil society and governments, we deliver food and provide shelter, support education and elections, clear minds, defend the environment, empower women, and strive for peace. But we cannot do it alone. This work depends on all people everywhere taking a stand. When we protect the most vulnerable, when we refuse to look away, when we speak up for the institutions that speak up for us, we keep human rights alive. Our rights should never take second place to profit or power. Let us unite to protect them for the dignity and freedom of all. End quotes. For me, and I hope for you as well, this call is urgent because true progress, including on the Sustainable Development Goals, is only possible when rights are respected and inequalities confronted. That is why the United Nations family in South Africa, and I'm happy colleagues are here as well, through our incoming cooperation framework, seeks to work side by side with the government, private sector, development partners, civil society, and communities to advance equality, gender justice, accountability, ethics and protection for those most marginalized. And ladies and gentlemen, as I come to a closure, let me say, human rights do not fulfill themselves. They require collective responsibility and everyday vigilance. The coming years will certainly continue to test our commitment to equality, climate justice, and democratic resilience, but we are not bystanders or powerless. Everyday actions keep rights alive, including defending a journalist's right to report, ensuring a child learns in safety, making services work for all, combating criminality and certainly GBV, challenging impunity and promoting integrity, standing with those on the margins and protecting the defenders who protect us. All of this matters, and these are everyday essentials. Let this year's theme, therefore, remind us that we must rebuild trust in institutions and one another. We must manage resources ethically. We must judiciously provide services, and we must center communities in decision-making and ensure rights are lived realities for everyone, every day, everywhere. I thank you.
So I hope you heard that. Human rights do not fulfill themselves. Everyday actions keep human rights alive. We are not bystanders. Thank you so much, Mr. Mufu. I would like to now introduce our next speaker from the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, Mr. Charles Mohalaba, who is the Deputy Director General, Court Administration. We welcome you, and of course, as you know, he is responsible for ensuring efficient court operations which directly support human rights by guaranteeing access to justice, in particular for vulnerable populations. So please join me in welcoming DDG Mohalaba to deliver his opening remarks.
Thank you, Program Director, for the opportunity. And I wish to say good morning to everyone who's here. And I stand on the protocol that has been established. But just like my brother here, special welcome to and recognition to the Public Protector of South Africa, Advocate Gcaleka. It's great to see you again. On this 10th day of December 2025, we pause to honor International Human Rights Day, a global beacon illuminating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted in 1948, while simultaneously marking the 29th anniversary of the signing of the South African Constitution in 1996. Our view as a department is that this convergence is not a mere coincidence. It highlights the profound interplay between universal aspirations and our nation's fundamental compact. In the South African context, these milestones resonate as twin pillars of a hard-won transition from the shadows of apartheid to the light of constitutional democracy. And this journey transformed a divided nation into one bound by the promise of dignity, equality, human rights, and freedom for all. It is quite important to also mention that our journey as a country towards freedom was greatly shaped by international solidarity. We would not have done this alone as a country and as a nation. The UN condemnation of apartheid through resolutions emphasized its inhumanity validated global resistance. Notably, the UN's condemnation of apartheid by the General Assembly called on member states to cut ties with South Africa and established a special committee against apartheid. The economic sanctions imposed by the United States and the European Economic Community in the 1980s applied substantial pressure to end apartheid, highlighting the Sharpeville massacre in 1960 also ignited international outrage, resulting in the numerous UN resolutions, boycotts, and diplomatic isolation that amplified the voices of the oppressed, resulting in the 21st March being declared as the International Day for Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Civil society movements abroad, ranging from cultural embargoes to solidarity campaigns, formed a network of global pressure against the fight of apartheid. We also recognize that this collective effort certainly resulted in more pressure for the regime at that time, resulting in a democratic dispensation in 1994. Locally, we also recognized that state institutions supporting democracy remain key in our efforts. My dear brother has indicated the role of Chapter 9 institutions, including the role that is being played by the Public Protector of South Africa, towards addressing all forms of inequality and injustice. The year 2025 has indeed marked the 30th anniversary of the establishment of the South African Human Rights Commission, the Constitutional Court, the Public Protector, institutions where we continue to support. One of those milestones to acknowledge towards achieving gender equality is the appointment of our very first female Chief Justice, Mandisa Muriel Lindelwa Maya, as our Chief Justice in South Africa. Reflecting on our progress that we've made up to so far since the dawn of democracy in 1994, we have indeed charted a way, indeed a remarkable way, to ensure that we advance and protect the human rights in our everyday practices. Of course, what we see as a reality on the ground today demonstrates that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to enforce and protect the human rights. Access to basic services has broadened significantly, including household electrification, clean water reaching millions of people in our country, cultivating environments where families can thrive rather than merely survive. Again, we wish to emphasize that given the milestones that has been achieved as a country, there's still a lot that needs to be done. Gender-based violence continues to cast a long shadow. The 2024 gender-based violence study does reveal that more than 1 in 3 women have experienced physical or sexual violence in their lifetime, with over 10,000 reported rape cases in the third quarter of 2024 alone. As a department, we process these matters in the courts on a daily basis, where vulnerable persons seek justice and protection in our courts and in the justice system. We witness an unflinching resolve, the declaration of gender-based violence and femicide as a national disaster. The President has made a declaration in this regard through and formalized such in November, classification, and formalized that in November 2025. The fight against gender-based violence and femicide continues in our country. And indeed, all law enforcement agencies and institutions supporting democracy are at the forefront of this initiative. This development reflects the democratic space in our constitution, which has been created, where before the constitutional era, demands for justice were frequently met with state repression, and dissenting voices were often silenced through restrictive measures. Today, within our democratic framework, citizens can engage more freely in process of reform through petitions, litigation, and mobilization. And while the challenges remain, the civic activism that contributed to this national declaration disaster demonstrates the level of public engagement that would have been difficult, if not possible, under previous dispensations. And of course, what we envision is that we recognize that realizing this full vision requires ongoing commitment from all stakeholders. The vision that former Justice Albie Sachs painfully described on matters relates to our constitutional values, who is an apartheid, anti-apartheid activist, who captures the following words in essence, and I quote, "The Constitution was designed to heal the division of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights," unquote. These words reflect the profound intent, not merely to just codify the laws of this country, but to inform ongoing renewal, maintaining a democratic and inclusive state amid change. Through it, South Africa has championed significant transformation from abolishing discriminatory laws to empowering marginalized voices in governance, demonstrating that a living constitutions can evolve, heal, and unite. In closing, Program Director, let this day indeed propel us towards collectively and dealing with having a concerted action as we nurture, protect, and innovate in service of the human rights. May we honor the sacrifices of yesterday by securing the essentials of tomorrow as a nation, for in their fulfillment lies not just our progress, but our shared humanity. Thank you very much, Program Director, for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, DDG. We didn't do it alone. There is still a lot to be done. There is a vision. Let this day propel us towards action. Thank you so much for your remarks. I would like to now welcome the Public Protector, Advocate Kholeka Gcaleka, who leads an institution that has stood as a guardian of accountability, transparency, and human rights in South Africa. Over 30 years, the office has been a vital pillar of constitutional democracy, ensuring that the voices of the vulnerable can be heard, that power is held to account, and that rights remain accessible to all, without fear or favor, I underscore. Advocate Gcaleka, it's an honor to have you. Thank you for being here. You have the floor.
I'm not certain about this podium. In respect of upholding my human rights. Thank you very much, Program Director, for this opportunity to address this very important gathering. Allow me to acknowledge, in his absentia, the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, Reverend Chris Nissen, the CEO of Constitution Hill, our host, Ms. Leah Mabusela, His Excellency Mr. Andre Nzapayeke, the Ambassador of the Central African Republic and Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Her Excellency Ms. Joanne Deurnevaart, the Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and also representing the Human Rights Forum representative, Mr. Nelson Murphy, the UN Resident Coordinator in South Africa, Mr. Charles Mohalaba, the Deputy Director General of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, all members of the Diplomatic Corps, civil society representatives and human rights defenders, distinguished guests, a very good morning to you all. The Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, in collaboration with the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, the South African Human Rights Commission, and the Constitution Hill, has convened this event to mark International Human Rights Day and the signing of our Constitution. This year, we also celebrate a remarkable 30 years of the Constitutional Court, the South African Human Rights Commission, and of course, the Public Protector, South Africa. We view our participation here in this event as a recognition of the crucial role that we play in supporting and strengthening constitutional democracy. During the past 30 years of our constitutional democracy, which is evident from the collaborative investigations we embark on as the Public Protector as well as the Human Rights Commission. Allow me to quote from a human rights activist, Martin Luther King Jr., when he says, I quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It is demanded by the oppressed." I unquote. By so saying, I want to say to the Human Rights Commission, we stand by you as the Public Protector as you embark on a journey where you want your recommendations to be enforceable, because those who suppress human rights will not voluntarily ensure that these rights are being upheld, and therefore you should have the teeth to bite to enforce human rights and dignity in our country. As an independent institution, the Public Protector was established to investigate and remedy improper conduct in state affairs. Our work has been instrumental in holding government and state institutions and agencies accountable, thereby promoting transparency, accountability, and good governance. And by the way, as the Public Protector in South Africa, which is globally known as the Ombudsman, but we are the Ombudsman of a special type, an Ombudsman that has anti-corruption powers and binding remedial action, which is indeed unique in global governance in the world. In this regard, some of our key areas of progress include, but are not limited to, promoting equality and non-discrimination through the establishment of institutions and working with institutions such as the Human Rights Commission. But also globally, we are recognized as upholding human rights and freedoms, good governance, and the rule of law. It is critical that we too, in our investigations, we become human rights centered, so that our remedial actions ensure that not only do they remedy the prejudices, the biasness of our governance system, but they uphold human rights. This is evident from the joint investigations which we have done with the Human Rights Commission, such as that looking into the development of the Alexandra Township, higher education, and now the joint investigation which we've agreed to embark on, looking into our healthcare system and the impact of immigration thereon. If that doesn't show true corroboration in upholding human rights and dignity, not just in the people of South Africa, but the people of our continent. It is important, as you've stated, Mr. Murphy, that we look into the SDGs. As the Public Protector, we are part of the communities of International Ombuds Institutes, and we also chair the Commission on SDGs within the Ombudsman communities, because it is important that even in our investigations, we need to have a look into the UN Convention, those that our country has committed to. How far is our country in implementation? It is not a good sign that as a country, we are reported in the Sustainable Development Report that poverty is deepening, unemployment is deepening, inequality is deepening, and as investigative institutions entrusted with upholding governance and also entrusted with ensuring that the lives of the people of South Africa are actually improving in line with what is envisaged in our Constitution, that we are vested with addressing the imbalances of the past. And therefore, the deepening of poverty, inequality, and unemployment is therefore not in line with that which was envisaged in our Constitution. And therefore, this must find significance in the work so that we become impactful. And in the next SDG report, we really want to see the picture changing. Over the last 30 years, the Office of the Public Protector has transformed abstract rights into tangible remedies, from exposing state capture to tackling gender-based violence and land tenure insecurities. Our proactive dialogues with organs of states mitigate root causes like poor governance, while thematic probes into varying issues, including neonatal deaths, education access, promote social justice and security. These efforts humanize bureaucracy, ensuring marginalized communities, often plugged into inequality and service failures, experience the Constitution's promise of dignity, equality, and freedoms. However, the challenges persist. Despite this progress, we still face significant challenges relating to poverty and inequality. A significant portion of our population still lives in poverty, and that poverty remains highest among specific groups. This has then prompted us as the Public Protector to actually be developmental and institute systemic investigations looking into the incomplete infrastructures such as water infrastructure, housing, and roads, because these two are necessities in upholding human rights. We more often get reports from the Statistics General stating that about 90%, 95% or so of water has been rolled out in our country, but what we do not hear is actually what is the percentage of water that is actually coming out of the taps. And that is the reality that South Africans need to know. But also, what hinders the progress of this democracy and the full realization of human rights remains the erosion of governance and corruption in our country, but also in our continent at large. Strengthening governance and combating corruption are crucial for upholding human rights and freedoms. These are many negative consequences to these causes, such as the adverse impact that misappropriation of funds has on the healthcare infrastructure, staffing, access to quality services. Corruption hampers water supply, sanitation, and infrastructure maintenance. Bribes and nepotism hinder equitable distribution of resources at large, including housing. These in turn erode public trust as citizens lose faith and become cynical of government institutions when corruption persists. When public trust in state institutions is eroded, usually the marginalized suffer disproportionality. But also we see that in how the public respond to elections. It is just not the public not having an interest in voting, but it is despondency because of the erosion of public trust. To address these issues, we desperately need to strengthen our laws, but most importantly, we need to strengthen the implementation of those laws and our policies. But as Tom Bingham says in his book, The Rule of Law, we cannot do this if the hands of those in which this rule of law or the upholding of our constitutional rights is entrusted are not ethical, are not clean. These will not be realized. We need to ensure as a country that we've got ethical governance. Those who lead us have the love and the passion for human rights. But it must be those who are of character, who must be able to enforce and uphold these rights. The Public Protector uses domestic human rights law as the foundation for findings and remedial action to the conclusion of an investigation as one component of the domestic legal system that is standard by which we determine whether administrative conduct is improper or procedurally fair. A human rights-based approach to our work reflects the essence of an ombudsman's historic and fundamental objective of humanizing bureaucracy and improving the experience of service users. But as we know, we live within a global governance system. We cannot just look into South Africa without looking into the African continent. Just like the human rights is recognized in the African Union, we have put forward as the public protector in South Africa, representing ombudsmen in the continent, a draft resolution to the South African government which actually emphasizes the work and calls for the recognition of the work of ombudsmen in the African Union to uphold good governance, human rights, and the rule of law, but also to stand by our sister institutions, the Human Rights Commission, to ensure that we are more impactful in enforcing and upholding human rights in the continent. We are pleased to also inform you that the chairperson of the African Union, the president of Angola, has also received these news well and has promised to support this draft resolution. We need to take Africa forward. It is this generation which must at least take Africa halfway or even more towards the realization of the Africa Agenda 2063. As the public protector, we therefore realize our important role to play in making state role players accountable for their actions and decisions. Accountability requires that state role players make themselves accountable for their actions by having in place effective complaints mechanisms, but also by making sure that we are able to enforce consequence management. We cannot see the realization of the aspirations of our Constitution without the enforcement of consequence management. Allow me then in closing to refer that collaboration with a diverse range of stakeholders, including government agencies, civil society organizations, and international bodies, is crucial in tackling these complex challenges. By working together, sharing resources, expertise, and experiences, progress can be made towards promoting and protecting human rights in our country. It is through this collective effort that sustainable solutions can be developed and sustained and maintained to address the systemic issues that hinder the full realization of human rights for all individuals in the country. The most important meaning of applying a human rights-based approach to development policy is focusing on the interest of vulnerable groups in society, and especially those who are at risk of being marginalized. This is because they are in a disadvantaged position in many aspects, such as economic prowess, culture, society, and are more difficult than other social groups to access and enjoy achievements brought by developmental policies of the state. Allow me, distinguished guests, to quote from Nelson Mandela when he addressed the International Ombuds Institute, which was in South Africa in 1996, hosted by the first public protector, Judge Selby Baqwa, when he says, I quote, "Public awareness and participation in maintaining efficiency in government within the context of human rights are vital to making reality of democracy. Many South Africans can still recall a time when the face of the public service was hostile and the complaint could lead to victimization or harassment, when access to justice seemed unrealistic of a dream. In the new South Africa, the face of the public service is changing radically. However, we are not yet out of the woods. Much still needs to be done in terms of the transformation. In this sense, therefore, our Public Protector's Office is not only a critical instrument for good governance, it also occupies a central place in the transformation of the public service by, amongst others, rooting out the arrogance, secrecy, and corruption so rampant during the apartheid years, I unquote. I guess then he didn't know that the very same secrecy, arrogance, and corruption would be as rampant in the democratic dispensation. Hence, collaboration is important for the freedom of the people of our country. I thank you.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. What a powerful way to end. Thank you so much, Public Protector, for sharing the legacy of your organization, but also just reminding us that some of these issues are not just words on paper. They're really guarantees that we need to live by. And we certainly join you in advocating to ensure that your office remains strong, well-resourced in order to do its important work. Thank you once again. I'd like to now turn to South African Human Rights Commission representative, Ms. Matena Hunter-Parsonage, to come and make her remarks. As all of you know, and we've spoken about the Commission quite a lot already today, the South African Human Rights Commission's mandate is to promote and protect human rights in South Africa. They're celebrating 30 years as well this year. And of course, from the international perspective, what is important is that they are an A-status Paris Principle compliant institution. So, Ms. Matena Hunter-Parsonage, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Good morning, distinguished guests, our sister Chapter 9 institution, the Public Protector, our partners in government, our partners in civil society, and all who live in South Africa. Today on International Human Rights Day, we join millions around the world in reaffirming the inherent right to dignity and equal worth of every human being. We also mark our own national milestone, the signing of the Constitution into effect. It's a document that remains one of the most progressive and hopeful human rights charters in the world. International Human Rights Day is more than an annual commemoration. It is a reminder that our struggle for freedom did not end in 1994, nor did it end in 1996 when the President signed our Constitution into law. Rather, it is a call to reflection and renewal. It urges us to ask, how far have we come, and equally, how far do we still need to go? South Africa's constitution did not simply establish a democratic state. It laid the foundation for society based on human dignity, equality, freedom, the rule of law, participatory governance, and social justice. It is a living instrument, one that speaks not only to legal rights, but to the kind of society we aspire to build. It guarantees, and as the first of its kind, it guarantees socioeconomic rights, the immediately realizable right to education. It creates institutions like the Public Protector and the South African Human Rights Commission to protect rights, advance equality, and hold power accountable. It places the burden of realization on all of us, state and society alike, to uphold the values of openness, justice, and human solidarity. International human rights norms and our constitutional rights framework work in partnership. They guide our laws. They strengthen our courts. They protect those whose voices are too often unheard. They remind us that rights are universal, indivisible, inalienable, and that no one is less deserving of dignity than another. But we must also confront the reality that too many South Africans still live without the full benefit of these rights. The promises of the Constitution remain unfulfilled for millions who face unemployment, crime, hunger, inadequate public services, gender-based corruption, and inequality that remains among the highest in the world. There is not a day that goes by that the South African Human Rights Commission does not receive a complaint about access to basic services or receive a complaint about unfair discrimination and hate speech. The right to equality is compromised each time prejudice goes unchallenged. The right to dignity is eroded every time a person cannot access basic services. The right to life is diminished in communities living under the shadow of violence. Human rights are not realized through words alone. They are realized through daily action by government, through effective delivery, by institutions through vigilant oversight, by civil society through mobilization, by communities through solidarity, and by individuals through their choices and their conduct. The struggle continues not because our Constitution is weak, but because we have not really fully lived up to it. As the Human Rights Commission, we therefore call on every South African to recommit to the unfinished work of transformation. Let us uphold the Constitution not only as a legal document, but as a moral compass that should guide our decisions in homes, workplace, schools, public institutions, and across the nation. Let us continue to defend those whose rights are violated. Let us ensure that accountability is not optional. Let us insist that no one is excluded from the opportunities and protections promised by our constitutional democracy. Today is both a celebration and a challenge. Let us celebrate how far we have come as a nation that emerged from oppression to enshrine one of the most comprehensive bills of rights in the world. But let us also accept the challenge that lies before us, which, as the Public Protector said, is to convert the rights on paper into lived reality for all. On this International Human Rights Day, may we leave here with a new determination to advance justice, deepen equality, strengthen our constitutional order, and build a South Africa where human rights are not as aspirational but actual. The work of human rights defenders is not an easy one. We do not often have short-term wins. It is a long-term project. For some of us, we have been privileged to watch the realization of human rights. For others, we work towards something for future generations that we may not live to see. But the work continues, and together we will ensure that the promise of our Constitution reaches every life, every home, and every community. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those remarks, and also for all the work that you do. I know that the Commission and all of you at the Commission, you have your work cut out for yourselves. And we certainly join you in your determination to advance justice and the promise of the Constitution. I would now like to invite a message of support from the international community, delivered by Ambassador Joanne Doorneveld of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, on behalf of a loose gathering of diplomatic missions and development partners that meet periodically to exchange views on human rights. And just so you know, just last week, Ambassador Doorneveld took the initiative to award a woman human rights defender the Golden Tulip Award. So I really want to thank you, Ambassador, for your leadership and also always opening your doors to human rights. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I'm not going to mention all the important guests here, but it's great to see a full room of people who mind what's happening in the world and who mind about human rights. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to extend a message of support from the Human Rights Forum. Today, as the world marks International Human Rights Day, South Africa also honors the anniversary of the signing of the Constitution. We heard about that as well earlier this morning. It's described as one of the most visionary human rights instruments of the modern era. This dual commemoration is a reminder that constitutional promises must be continually renewed through practice, vigilance, and collective effort. International Human Rights Day reminds us that human rights are not abstract ideals. They are the practical, essential conditions that allow individuals and societies to live in dignity, security, and equality. This year's theme, Human Rights, Our Everyday Essentials, underscores that rights are woven into daily life, from access to justice and basic services to the freedom to speak and participate, and in the protection of those at risk of exclusion. In 2024, the Human Rights Forum of Southern Africa was launched. And this forum reflects a shared commitment by a cross-regional grouping of diplomatic missions and development partners to demonstrate leadership on human rights and work together collaboratively in practical, solution-oriented ways to address challenges and showcase good practices. The forum has brought together diverse perspectives to a common table to strengthen the bridge between international norms and the lived realities across Southern Africa. It's a commitment to listen, collaborate and act in ways that reinforce human rights for all people in Southern Africa. It also reflects a shared understanding that no single actor can meet today's challenges alone. Cooperation is not just strategic, it's essential. And therefore, we reaffirm our collective support to the government and people of South Africa. On this International Human Rights Day and on the anniversary of South Africa's constitution, we stand united in our commitment to uphold the human rights that define our humanity and shape our common future. Human rights are the foundation of peaceful, resilient, and inclusive societies. Together, we can make these everyday essentials a lived reality for all the people across Southern Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for reminding us about how human rights are interconnected across the world. We're really grateful for your presence and your message of support. So folks, I know that it's been a long intro, but let me remind you that good things always come to those who wait. So we're going to take a very short interlude to listen to a little bit of music, a cultural performance. And I'm really pleased that we have Mo Africa wa Mohati Kiba Trio. You'll tell me if I didn't pronounce it right. And this group is not just art for art's sake. It embodies humanity, our dignity, and the vibrant tapestry of identities whose rights we defend. I suspect, but I'm not entirely sure, that we can expect blends of jazz, soul, and Kiba rhythms, as well as some deep, sassy vocals that will keep us wanting more. So over to you, Mo Africa wa Mohati Kiba Trio.
Yeah. Susa. Noma, nini, noma, nini, 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 noma, nini, noma, nini, 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 noma, nini, tina singai Susa tina, noma, nini. When your mother is a commander, young men and women fight for freedom too feeble for their hands to grasp. When your mother is a brigadier who starves hand grenades in her head wrap, you are bound to protect. And when your mother is Nomsamo, Winnie Matizela Umakoti Wagwamantela, greatness is an inheritance. Basadi who never sat on the sidelines, but they fought side. 11-year-olds crying left at home. I want to see. Whoa, 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 whoa. Warrior woman. Gebelaga ke basadi di kwangkwetla ba go emeka sebete go bane ba ikwishisha basadi ba makhonta khodia khokho. I stand on the shoulders of warrior women, of Njinga, of Nefertiti, of Maketa, of Mujaji Munishapula Mantadis. The victory women.
Let's give it up one more time for Moafika wa Mohati Kiba. Thank you so much for getting us into a groove and making us want to get down. Thank you so much. So now I'm going to be handing it over to my co-moderator, Mr. Lukhona Mnguni, who I introduced earlier on. We are shifting from reflection to action now, and the next session is really about human rights in action. It brings us into the living space where human rights are practiced, protected, and pushed forward. You will hear from voices who show, each in their own way, that human rights do not live in courtrooms or constitutions only. They live and find meaning in people. So these conversations will bridge the values we honor today with the practical change communities demand every day. These speakers will demonstrate how human rights look in action when they are nurtured, defended, and even reimagined. So it is my pleasure, Lukhona, to hand it over to you. Thank you.
It sounds like a very good, is it afternoon already? No, it's still morning, still morning. A very good morning. When the public protector said that this podium she's not sure about, at least she had high heels on. I don't. So. I'm going to do, I never know who decides how things shift in this country, but they do shift indeed. It used to be all protocol observed. And somebody now has introduced something on the protocol that has been established. And then they still go on to recognize other people after that. So I'm not sure which protocol is more important than the other anymore, but please allow me to stand on the protocol that has been established without really recognizing other people. The only other person I might have recognized is the ambassador. Now she's left because she once hosted me for a very beautiful free lunch at her residence sometime this year. It's always good to be back at this venue, Constitution Hill, because as we shift towards action, we stand on the wrath that was felt by those who decided to dare to take action and confront the system and the brutality of apartheid. The last time I was here was actually in August when the AMCU Union was commemorating 13 years since Marikana massacre. It is quite clear then that this idea of human rights, the fight for them, the enforcement for them, continues to still carry the loss of life even in democratic South Africa. We would remember Andries Tatane in Vicksburg fighting for water in his community, dying, and those who hailed him with rubber bullets managing to get off scot-free. Many examples in the communities of Katomena in KwaZulu-Natal where people protest being even shot at with live ammunition. Who can forget Fees Must Fall when the students dared to take on the system of higher education and highlight the brutality of the funding and commercialization and commodification of higher education, which was exactly 10 years ago from now in 2015. And students, particularly one of our friends who took a hail of 10 rubber bullets on her back at the Wits University. These are just demonstrations that this is not an easy journey. It's not a question to really pontificate and theorize about. Those who have dared to challenge the system and fight to enforce these human rights have felt the brutality, not of the apartheid state, but of the democratic state as well. It makes us question whether or not the culture of the state itself has transformed enough to become a democratic culture of the state. We also gather here with something that some people call, disillusionment with elections, disillusionment with democracy and all of these things. But really it's the erosion of our social fabric and undermining of the social contract, and that social contract being the Constitution itself. There's missing confidence that the Constitution can achieve the vital promises that it carries, and this comes from all sides and walks of life of people, both those who are beneficiaries of the colonial and apartheid system, and those who are meant to be the who are meant to be the beneficiaries of the promise of the democratic dispensation. And that's why we have a lot of fights, people questioning whether this constitution we talk about today, 29 years since its signing into effect, is still the relevant document for people to seek refuge. What I do like, though, is that people, though they may well still be disillusioned with the Constitution, still seek refuge in the instruments established by the Constitution when they're in trouble. Even those that say abolish the Constitution, when they are not happy with the commission appointed by the President, they find themselves before the courts of law of South Africa challenging those very same decisions. So there's still a bit of promise then that this Constitution, though many people may not be happy with it, whether you look at the debates we've had over the years about Section 25 in terms of the property rights clause and what needs to happen there, and the parliamentary processes that were instituted to check on whether or not there's appetite to relook at that property rights clause, whether you hear the debates about people's confrontation of the mandate of the South African Reserve Bank. All of these are questions primarily that are born out of this Constitution. And the Constitution itself, of course, is not a self-insulated document. It does allow itself to be amended, of course, depending which sections of the Constitution you want to amend. The thresholds of the votes that you'd need in Parliament differ. If you want to amend the preamble, you've got a higher calling in terms of how much parliamentarians, how many parliamentarians you need to vote. So as we talk about those who have done the coalface work, and as I've shared, there are ordinary struggles in society. If you look at the explosion of service delivery protests since 2004, when what was dubbed the honeymoon of democracy came to an end, and you look at those kind of protests, but sometimes they get to impede, for example, the work of the Independent Electoral Commission. As we go towards local government elections, we'll probably see a much more explosion of that. What we've also seen, and as somebody who stayed in KZN for a very, very long time, is since 2011 an explosion. As people assert their rights to stand for elections and to be elected, we've seen a brutal killing of councillor candidates. We've seen a brutal killing of councillors. If you go to a community in Paarl, in the Western Cape, in Mbekweni, I got there and I spoke to some activists in 2023, and they were telling me about how one of the councillors, the son is a gangster, and the gangster son then intimidates anyone who wants to stand against the father as a local government councillor. These are the real challenges that we confront as some women in Khayelitsha exercise their right to wear their hair the way they want, but they have to pay protection fees to wear their weaves. And we've seen a spate of focus since the 2024 national and provincial elections, and there was even a special debate in Parliament on these questions of extortionists, construction mafias. But I'm trying to say it's not just the big picture. It's you having to pay 50 rands to wear your pair of sneakers, and you get given a ticket. It's a well-oiled system. And as I've gone around the country to realize that when you talk about these everyday essentials, being human rights, people can't exercise those everyday essentials. Abigail, I had a chance of sneaking into one video where you were talking about these everyday essentials in Bosman taxi rank in that video, and really these are, and I think it's an apt it's an apt theme for this year. Of course, today also marks the end of the 16 days of activism on gender-based violence. Of course, people have said it must be 16 days of activism every day, but I think you know what I mean. Next year will also mark 50 years since June 16 of 1976. And of course, this year we also marked 70 years of the Freedom Charter, which is the foundational document that gave birth to this constitution that we celebrate. So it's going to be a very, very busy year between now and the next time. We will also have local government elections, and I think they will be in November, and they ought to be in November. Anything else doesn't make sense, at least to me, but I'm not the one who must decide what it is that must happen. Politicians always tend to think they've got better wisdom than all of us, and that's why we must try elect the best amongst them into office, because indeed, colleagues, as we talk about actioning on human rights, we don't all have the same and similar power to effect this, document that's called the Constitution into life. There are those who are tasked with the duty of public service, who are our public representatives. They are tasked with stewardship over the public purse, and if we allow them to steal. I know that South Africans have been saying these last 6 months have been the months of yo, yo, yo. You don't know what to say yo to, and you are sitting there, you don't know which commission to, switch on to. You put all of them on, and then, but you can't listen to all of them and do them justice at the same time. Of course, we also meet at a time. In fact, when the invitation came, I thought, how are we going to do this? Because there's a National General Council of that other party. Now, do we come here or do we go to Birchwood? Well, it was meant to be Nasrec, then it became Birchwood. And when they are confused about venue, it's fine. I'll come to Cornhill and be with you on this day today. And so, yes, this is where we are. We're going to kick off with somebody who's not, well, it depends who you are. We always say, this must not be a foreign face, but because the people who are here probably very familiar with him. I've known Mark Haywood now for a very, very long time, and he has, worked in the coalface of some of the struggles across, health, medication, health systems, education systems, access to education, questions around the death of children in pit latrines and all of this, working with the HIV and AIDS, activism community, decided that maybe the civil society thing is a bit frustrating. Let me get my hands a little dirty into these political, foundations and movements, because we do have to get politics right. And I think that we really, when we talk about recommendations, for example, of the Human Rights Commission, and now they are before the Constitutional Court trying to get these enforcement measures, the public protector had to go through the loops of courts to ensure what is the interpretation of remedial action. And that's because there's a sense of lack of goodwill on those the recommendations are sent to. And that is why I'm saying you can't absent this. And I know activists can be very much purists. I'm an activist, I don't do politics, but politics is doing you, don't worry, whether you're not doing it, it's fine, but politics will happen on you. And I think Mark Haywood is an embodiment of, as we dub him today, the human rights nurturer, somebody who has solely dedicated, himself in that struggle. Some of us, we dabble in everything, as Abigail said. I don't know what I do sometimes. I'm accused of not having work. But Mark, we know what he does, and as the human rights nurturer, he's going to kick us off and remind us at this moment, at this juncture, when I say, I feel that our social fabric is eroding and it's undermining this social contract. What does that mean, and what should we do? Because that's the big question. Mark.
Good morning, comrades, colleagues, friends. It's great to be with you, and it's great to have an opportunity on International Human Rights Day to just pause a little bit and reflect on the significance of this particular day, particularly at a time like this, as Lakona has just described, in the world and in South Africa. Abigail talked about how it was 77 years ago that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was approved and drafted in 1948. The funny thing is that at the same time as the UDHR was being drafted in Geneva and in New York, far away in Scotland, an English activist and writer called George Orwell was writing one of the most famous books of the 20th century, a book that he published in 1949 and which we know as 1984. And in 1984, George Orwell depicted an authoritarian state, Big Brother, and so on, if you've read it, and coined some slogans. Freedom is slavery. War is peace. Ignorance is strength. And those rewriting, distorting of truths were meant to be the truths of that order. Well, if you look at the world today, you see that those truths are being propagated by people like the President of the United States of America. And you might add to them, human rights are wrong. Human wrongs are right. because we're living in a time where there is misinformation, disorientation, denial, misunderstanding being deliberately spread about the whole ethos of human rights. And it was in that context that about 2 weeks ago, I co-organized a workshop looking specifically at health misinformation. Because health misinformation has become a human rights threat. Health misinformation has become a pandemic. It's causing confusion. It's causing people not to take vaccines. It's causing people not to take medicines. It's causing distrust in healthcare systems. And it's a new example of how human rights issues reinvent themselves continually in our society. And in the course of the discussion in that workshop, one of the participants stood up and argued and said we should stop talking about human rights because human rights language doesn't resonate with anybody anymore. It's sterile. It's at a distance from people. It's too legalistic. If we want to mobilize people for human rights, we should talk about love, and we should talk about solidarity, and we should talk about social justice, but leave human rights out of the picture. And I responded to her by saying, you're right and you're wrong. We do need to talk more about love and solidarity and compassion. But human rights and compassion and solidarity are not at odds with each other. And at this moment in history, we should not surrender the importance of human rights. And so I thought when I was asked to speak today that it was a good opportunity to try to help us to rethink human rights and their validity and importance in 2025 and beyond. When I was approached and asked to speak, I was asked to talk about speak in the form of storytelling, blending personal reflection and inspiration and illustrating how human rights are everyday essentials. I'm not a very good person at talking about myself or personal stories or personal struggles. So what I'm going to try to do is to answer this question about are human rights still relevant by trying to show you what human rights have taught me and what human rights have given to me over many, many years. In fact, I think I've been a human rights activist now for 45 years. If I start counting when I was still at school in 1977, and I was moved by the murder of Steve Biko and began to organize in school against apartheid. I was living in England in those days. So I want to start by saying, you know, we often think about human rights activism as being about sacrifice, people who make sacrifices, sometimes the ultimate sacrifice. And sometimes people are called on to make the ultimate sacrifice. And human rights does require that we live more modestly. And it does require that in our lives we embrace the idea of working always in the public interest rather than in self-interest to advance the benefits to everybody in society. But I've realized that being a human rights activist gives you back much more than you give into human rights very often. And what I've tried to do, and I've summarized them on this slide that I can't quite see from here, but I've tried to summarize some of the powers that I think that we gain through human rights activism and through sustaining human rights activism. And I'm going to speak briefly to each one of these powers, drawing on personal experience in my life as a human rights activist. So let me start with this, what I call the power of learning. I've been a human rights activist for 45 years. I've worked in civil society in South Africa for as long as the Constitution, in fact, for as long as our democracy, 1994. And one thing I've learned is that human rights activism requires that you learn something new every single day. Because every single day you are called on to understand, to articulate, to organize around an issue that you may not properly understand. And I'll give you an illustration of where it started, because I've worked quite a lot in the space of law. In 1999, just after we'd formed the Treatment Action Campaign in South Africa, we started a court case against the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, which was all the global big pharma companies, which control incredible wealth. And on the day we started the case, Zaki Ahmad came to me. You know Zaki Ahmad, one of the founders of the TAC, and gave me about 6 lever arch files of legal papers about intellectual property and pharmaceutical patents and so on. And I had no knowledge of any of those things. I'd never thought about intellectual property, barely thought about law in my life. But as an activist, we had to learn that stuff. And we sat down and we went through those files and we taught ourselves about intellectual property, and we mastered the arguments and we mastered the deceptions and the disinformation, and we beat the Pharmaceutical Association of South Africa in court when we supported the South African government. And the result of beating the PMA in court was that within 2 years, it was possible to manufacture generic antiretroviral medicines in South Africa and use them throughout South Africa and throughout Africa and literally save millions of lives. That's the power of learning. The second power I wanted to talk about is just the power of imagination and the imagination of power. And I'm having to talk about these things very quickly because I've only got 15 minutes. But again, I've come to understand that when we talk about human rights, we have to constantly imagine. We have to constantly think about how we do things as activists, so that we capture imagination, so that we give people a sense of their own power, a willingness to act. Because through imagination and through power, you can challenge power. And again, it's helped me to realize that organized good is more powerful than organized evil. We imagined our campaign against the pharmaceutical companies. One of the ways we did it was we decided we're going to smuggle medicines into South Africa because people were dying. But we didn't just smuggle medicines into South Africa and start giving them to doctors to treat people with HIV. We smuggled medicines into South Africa, and then we held a press conference as soon as we had come through customs and said, here is our smuggled medicines. We challenged Pfizer, the pharmaceutical company, to come and sue us for saving lives. And the response of Pfizer was to make a $75 million donation of the particular medicine that we were smuggling to the South African government. And for me, that was imagination, because we put them in a place where they had no response. The third point is the power of solidarity. And here I just want to talk about when we get together like this, when we march. I've been marching for 40 years. I first marched against apartheid in London in probably 1984. I probably last marched last week. But we have to keep on marching, because marching is where we feel the power of community. And I found this beautiful quotation from Tsitsi Dangarembga, who many of you will know, a Zimbabwean writer. And she uses these words: "Our expressions of pain are proof of our living, proclaiming that we are hurting but still breathing. This is why there is a saying in Zimbabwe, chikuru kufema, the big thing is to breathe. That which is dead does not feel. We are not dead while we protest." So the power of solidarity. I'm going to speed up now, Chair. The power of building public interest organizations and bettering lives. I've helped found the Treatment Action Campaign, Section 27, Corruption Watch, a whole bunch of organizations. The way I look at organizations these days is they're like children. You give birth to them, you grow them, and then you let them go. Let them loose on the world. And hopefully when you let them loose on the world, they go out and continue doing work to advance human rights and social justice. The power of friendship. I've realized that when you're a human rights activist, you're never good enough just by yourself. You always need close comrades and friends to work with you to be successful. I had a very close friendship with Zaki Ahmad that gave birth to the Treatment Action Campaign. I had a very close friendship with Adila Hassim that gave birth to Section 27 and the work of Section 27. Adila was the lawyer, I was the shit stirrer. But if you put a shit stirrer together with a lawyer, you get good results. The next thing is a more painful thing, the power of intimacy. Being a human rights activist takes you deep into people's lives. I remember a friend called Sarah Hlahlele, who lived with AIDS. The first time I met Sarah Hlahlele, she was crying, sniveling in a corner of a house in Sharpeville, eating out of a frying pan because her relatives wouldn't let her use the knives and forks because she had HIV. And she was a broken woman, broken by stigma, broken by discrimination. 2 years later, I saw Sarah standing outside the High Court in Pretoria as one of the applicants holding a little baby who had been born with HIV and whose story was told in the court case. I saw Charlene Wilson die. I was with her when she died. A beautiful activist from Isterus, somebody I thought could never die, but she died of AIDS. I have wept with Rosina and James Komape, the parents of Michael Komape, the little boy who drowned in the toilet in Shebeng village in Limpopo. And I'm still friends with the families of the Life Esidimeni victims, in particular Christina Nkomalo, whose sister Virginia was one of the people who died, and whose Virginia's daughter died literally of a broken heart, literally, because of the death of her mother. And what this has taught me about human rights activism is that when you see people at their most vulnerable, you assume a duty to stay with them until you have won that struggle. And that's something I say to civil society activists. We can't pop in and out. The Life Esidimeni tragedy happened 10 years ago. I'm glad to say that Section 27 is still pursuing justice for the Life Esidimeni victims after 10 years. And that's what we should all do, because it places an obligation on us. And the last thing I want to say before I conclude is the power of power. We're very powerful as people, believe it or not. Most people feel very powerless. In South Africa, we're amongst the most powerful people in the world because of our constitution and the powers that it gives us. We have to use that power. And with that power sometimes comes exhilaration and a sense of joy. I can remember in 2002 when we won the Treatment Action Campaign case at the Constitutional Court. At the time, I was speaking at the International AIDS Conference in Barcelona, in Spain, when the news came through. And there was about 1,000 people in the room. And as the news came through, the first time in my life, there was a standing ovation as we reported on the victory of the Treatment Action Campaign in that case. And the power of that power is that today 6 million people live with HIV, receiving antiretroviral medicines through the public health care system, who would have died otherwise. Today, less than 1% of children are born with HIV to mums with HIV. In those days, 25%. That was the power of activism. That was the power of people when they started to organize and fight together. So I just wanted to make those 7 reflections as a way to share, to try to make human rights. I guess that's obvious. Abigail said something that I wrote down at the start of this. To love human rights is to love human beings. And we have to love human beings, and we have to continue to be human beings ourselves. But I want to finish just with a couple of strong points about where we are today. Human rights are not cold, they're not legalistic, they're the stuff of life and living. They are a portal to a better way of being. There is no doubt that human rights offer the best architecture that centuries of human society has created to date as to how to organize human societies. But we don't take advantage. I keep on looking, Abigail, at the United Nations and thinking, do people understand that architecture? It's a world within a world of principles and systems and ideas which are meant to protect human rights. It's an embryo of a different world. But we are allowing it to be dismantled. And I do feel we are allowing it. I think we are too passive with what is going on. We talked earlier on, Lukhona talked about the Constitution. We must debate the Constitution, but we debate what the Constitution has failed to do, but not what it has achieved. And it has achieved an immense amount in the life of the Constitutional Court. Often small, often invisible, often about the power of a domestic worker or the power of a worker or the power of a queer person or people's rights of access to housing or the power of people living with HIV or gender equality. But you'd be amazed if we showed people what the Constitution has actually done. It hasn't created the new society, no. But the Constitution was never a wand. The Constitution was an instruction to us and to government about how we build this society. As with architecture, it's only a design. You need builders to bring the design to life. We have to be the builders of that design, but it's a very, very powerful design. So my conclusion, I think we have to understand that at this moment in South Africa and the world, there's what I call a battle for the soul of humanity going on in the world. We're witnessing something unprecedented in history, a pincer movement from the West and from the East, both against human rights. Trump and Xi Jinping, authoritarian states closing in on people, authoritarian creep, and we have to do something about it. And what disappoints me about our community, Abigail, and activists here, is we're not doing enough to defend the Human Rights Project. We're not. we're not doing enough to show the vision of human rights, to show what human rights has achieved, to show when people debate new forms of economy that are around well-being rather than profit, that is supported by human rights, by the human rights architecture, to show that when people talk about inequality, that there are ways to overcome inequality. We don't need to knock the whole house down and start again. There's a house there, but we behave often as if there isn't a house there, because human rights are because too much of human rights is the preserve of thinkers and elites and so on, and not the preserve of the people. And we have to get it down to the people. We are not powerless, as I said. And to the Human Rights Commission and the Public Protector, they've left, some of them now, but I'm very happy to see the new energy in the Human Rights Commission. I'll be honest, I'm seeing a new energy in the Human Rights Commission. It wasn't announced, so I'll announce it. Today, the Human Rights Commission announced in a media release that it will be holding a national inquiry in March next year into the right to food in South Africa and why so many people are hungry. That's beautiful to see, because it gives activists something to rally around one of the gravest injustices that we have in our country. So 3 points in conclusion, and I'm not elaborating on any of them. We need human rights thinking. Number 1 point, human rights are not baubles on a Christmas tree. They're signposts. Number 2, human rights are not just to be asserted against violations, but for a different vision of the way we organize our society in South Africa. And number 3, human rights, if they, at this moment of grave danger to human rights, if they are not going to be co-opted or destroyed or dissolved, have to challenge structural power. We've got to stop using big, brave, bold language from platforms like this and being cowards when we go out into society. The reason why people are hungry in South Africa is because 4 or 5 food companies are profiteering from bread and fruit and vegetables and making their profits off the poorest of the poor. And the CEO, Peter Engelbrecht, takes home 87 million rand a year. The CEO of Shoprite. Shoprite makes 13 billion rand a year. Is that acceptable? Are we just going to complain about it? Are we going to do something about it? Are we going to protest outside Shoprite until Shoprite lowers prices? Are we going to litigate against Shoprite? So stop talking radical, start doing radical, because human rights demands radical. It demands action. It demands more than words. Sorry I went over time. Thank you.
You know, I must say, Mark, I was sitting there and very hopeful because you kept looking at your time. And I thought, oh, wow, here's a timekeeper. I don't have to do anything about it. And I think at some point, the seconds started ticking a little slower. And I thought, you know, for once I'm with people who are not politicians, because politicians, you say 10 minutes, they say times 2, times 3, and then... But you know, I mean, you end off on a very, very serious point on this food issue. I still have a problem with my bank that runs a slow lounge at the airport, and trying to address this issue, because one day I was chatting, you know, when your flight is delayed, you've got all the time at the slow lounge. So I'm chatting to the waitresses there, the people who manage the slow lounge. I say, okay, what happens to all of this food once the flights come to an end and we've all taken and departed from whichever airport? Say, well, we throw it away. I said, okay, how do you guys have lunch? Like, do you dish up here? No, we're not allowed. And we sometimes have to go to like the basement of the airport and eat quickly on the corridors and then come up. Now, of course, I'm not a socialist by any measure, nor am I a capitalist. I think I'm a social democrat. But when Karl Marx talks about this idea of the alienation of value, where you are alienated from the very thing that you produce and manage, there is a problem in that system. I also go to a lot of events, and we cater a lot, Abigail, at these events, but we also leave a lot of food behind at these events, and sometimes we don't allow people to pack skaftin at these events. And I used to think that this food issue, you know, is just a South African issue until I started living in Edinburgh. And I promise you, every catered for event at that university was packed. There were seminars that were not catered for, were not packed. So this idea of student hunger. And lastly, one story. I was helping a lecturer at the University of KwaZulu-Natal invigilate a political sciences class. And he says, you know, I stayed behind because I saw a student lurking behind. And he sort of creeped up on the student. And this student had literally seen somebody throwing an empty packet of chips into a bin. And all the student wanted to do was to tear open the packet of chips so that they can lick it and get a sense of flavor for their upkeep. That lecturer took that students for grocery shopping, and he committed to doing his groceries for an entire year. But I suppose when we talk about everyday essentials, this is exactly it. We need to talk in a way where we are not talking in abstract, and this is what I was talking to Charles about earlier, you know, this idea of human rights. And of course, we don't need to engineer the classroom of debates and litany of papers, whether we talk about positive rights, negative rights, this. Let's leave that for the lecture hall, okay? There's a time and place for that. I do think that this question around food is exceedingly important. I've fought with some people in government that ShopRite can be both a supermarket and a spaza shop. You drive on the R61 in the Eastern Cape towards Bizana from Port Edward. On your left-hand side in Redoubt, ShopRite has a container there you save. But it's because part of achieving these rights is to break down monopolies, oligarchs, and this concentration of wealth and capital. But our regulators are allowing it to happen. Government can put a regulation. I'm very keen on this issue. I promise you, you can't be a supermarket and a spaza shop at the same time, because you squeeze out the small enterprises in the townships, in the rural areas, the informal traders and so on, because you've got, when it's going to deliver at a mall, it's also delivering along your spaza shops, something that another person does not have. So we've got to be quite practical, and I agree, Mark, we've got to engineer what we call it the Rivonia circle, as you quite say, in that power of imagination and the imagination of power, the power to act. That's all we need to allow and do in communities. Not the power to talk, talking is good, but the power to act, and of course that action coming from the things that we need to talk about. I am going to make sure that at some point I give you, I know I'll be standing between you and lunch. We started a bit late, so just bear with us, but I promise you by top of the hour we'll be done. And I'll give you a chance after the second speaker to just, share some of your views. I don't like making audiences like we're just here to download so many views and then you've got nothing to say. I am going to call up somebody who's dubbed the protector of human rights, and this precinct is not foreign to her because she clocked here. And I am told that as we say 2025, she's also finishing 20 years as a practicing advocate or barrister. And she's then gone on to do many, many other things, founded organizations, recently left another, went on to found another, Chambers 56 in commemoration of the 1956 women's movement, really somebody who's well decorated as a senior counsel, but as an activist in her own right. And she is indeed someone who can stand tall to be known as our human rights protector, and that's Advocate Nasreen Rajab Badlender. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Lufu. I was going to say good morning, good afternoon now, everyone. It's a great honor to be here today and to be part of these proceedings. It's a particular honor and slightly terrifying to speak after Mark Hayward. I mean, Mark talks about the treatment action campaign. That was one of the first cases I was involved with as a clerk at the Constitutional Court. And so I want to say something about that, which I'll do. It's true that this precinct has a very special place in my heart. It is the start of my professional career, about 6 or 7 years after the Constitutional Court began its work. I clerked for former Chief Justice Arthur Chaskelson, and it was an incredibly exciting and inspiring time to be a young person entering into the profession of law and to see law in a way that was different to how we'd been taught law, because we started being taught law before the Constitution. I did anyway, before the Constitution existed. So being here today has reminded me of that time in my professional career. And it was a time when the Constitutional Court was really thinking about how to write judgments in a way that would shape how South Africans understood the Constitution, would give us some guidance around not just what the Constitution meant, but how it was going to impact our lives. And so what we saw at that time were judgments that don't actually look like the judgments that are coming out of the court now. They were very long judgments. They were judgments that had, there were multiple judgments by different judges at that point, dissents and concurrences. But the idea was that the court was giving us guidance about this new document that was going to not just rule, I was going to say rule our lives, but actually what it was doing was to give us some guidance about the country and the society we aspired to become. I was at the court for cases like treatment action campaign about access to Novarapine for pregnant mothers, rights of sex workers in Jordan. But the one I was thinking about this morning was Richtersveld, which was a case, a landmark case about land redistribution. And during the Richtersveld hearing, or the process leading up to the hearing, we spent at the court a lot of time engaging around the law, around the kind of nuances of language in the legislation and what it meant and what it didn't. We looked at the case from every possible kind of legal position, but in a very kind of analytical, clinical way. And we looked at international comparative law. This was all stuff we were taught to do, to look at it clinically like lawyers. But on the day of the hearing, I walked through into the courtroom, and as a Chief Justice's clerks, we had to make sure that everything was set for the case to take place. So I walked into the courtroom, and I had to stop because the entire courtroom was packed, and it was packed with members of the Richtersveld community. That's not uncommon, but what was unusual for me is I had to stop because the community were praying. And they were praying for the lawyers, they were praying for the judges, and for everyone involved in the case and for their own community. And I went back to my judge to tell him that this was happening, because it struck me that suddenly, I was young and naive, but it struck me that this was not just a case about law, this was a case about people. And what we did, and even though I was a clerk, I kind of, took it on that I had a role and a responsibility in whatever came out of the court. I really didn't have that responsibility, but as a young person in that area, you felt a responsibility. So it reminded me that the cases that come before our courts are not just about law, they're about people. And that the Constitutional Court specifically is a place it's almost like a different kind of a court. It is a place which is there to protect and enforce our rights like no other court. And that learning has stayed with me throughout my practice. And there have been several times in my career as an advocate where I've had to remind myself that actually my job as an advocate is to represent people. It's not just to act as an officer of the court, which, we're told as advocates that's what we are, but actually we're there to represent our clients and people. And particularly if you work in the field of public law, I think that that's something that is important to keep kind of reminding ourselves. I argued a case here a couple of months ago about the definition of rape. And it was an intense hearing, and I was on my feet, I think, for 3 hours or so, the court debating very actively about the technical complexities of the definition of rape and subjective versus objective tests of consent. But at the end of that process, I saw a young woman who was sort of standing on the side. She clearly wanted to talk to me, so I stopped and we chatted. And she said to me that she had come from Pretoria to watch the case, and that she was a law student, a first-year law student, but that she had come because she herself had been raped. And her rapists had walked free because of the very provision that we were debating in this very technical way. And she came because she wanted to see the way in which the law was going to develop to protect people like her. And that she said she was studying law to try and claim back some of her power, her lost power in her rape and in the court processes which followed. And that again reminded me that this is about individuals. And it's important for us to, as I say, to keep remembering these experiences are important. They remind us about why we do our job. One of the things I've realized through my practice is that, advocates, I often say, are quite an elitist bunch. We think that we operate separately from the rest of the legal system, from attorneys, from our clients, from NGOs. But actually, our strength, I've discovered, lies in collaboration with all of those different people. So one of the things I love about doing public interest law is that it is an incredibly collaborative process if you allow it to be. That most often the people on the ground, people, the activists, the clients know much more about things than I do. But I have to be a voice when I stand up in court and represent them. So I think one of the things I'm trying to teach the young people I work with is to work collaboratively and to learn from people that you're working with, whether they're the most junior attorney, whether they're a person from an NGO, whether they're an activist on the ground. If we learn from each other, I think we have a better chance of changing the law, of making the protections of the law real in people's lives. Mark already alluded to the fact that we were asked to speak in a kind of storytelling, engaging way about our experiences. And in the short time that I have, I thought what I should talk about is an area in which I've seen my practice develop in the last few years, which is really around issues of gender. And sometimes we've managed to successfully litigate issues and others less successfully. And I want to talk about specifically 2 cases that show that. We have this incredible constitution. We've talked about it extensively today. We have, in relation to sex and gender, we have amongst the most extensive protections in the world. We're a country where women should enjoy equal rights and protections of the law, equal pay, equal opportunities, where women are given power and freedom over their own bodies, which is something that seems like such a simple statement, but in most parts of the world today, that right is being eroded. So we are a country that does all of that for women, but we're also a country that has one of the highest rates of gender-based violence in the world. And I'm hesitant even about using the term gender-based violence because it's become so easy, it rolls off our tongue so easily that we forget that what it's actually about is rape and assault and brutality and violations of women's bodies and their most intimate spaces. So, you know, we have this unbelievable contradiction in our country. And so I'm constantly asking ourselves how we use the law to take this wonderful constitution and make it real in people's lives. And the answer I keep coming up with is slowly, because from my perspective, all I can try and do is do incremental cases, one case at a time, and try and change things. But you'll see from the two cases I'm about to talk about is that actually law is not a perfect tool, that most often law is limited, and we need to do our work in our different roles to change society, because the combination of society, a change in society, and the use of law is what will ultimately move things forward. So the first case I want to tell you about is what I thought of as a fairly simple case when it came to me. It was a case called Van Wyk, and there was a judgment on the case earlier this year. The case started with a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Van Wyk, sitting in their home with an attorney friend, a lawyer friend, and they were having a glass of wine, and they were talking about the fact, well, two of them were having a glass of wine, the third was pregnant, and they were talking about the fact that in their family, Mr. and Mrs. Van Wyk wanted Mr. Van Wyk to stay home and raise the child that was coming. Because Mrs. Van Wyk was a more successful, she ran 2 businesses, she earned more money, and it made sense for the family for her to keep working after the child was born. But they realized when Mr. Van Wyk went to his employer that they couldn't actually do this, because the employer said, you only get paternity leave and that's 10 days, and maternity leave doesn't apply to you. So because they had a friend who was a lawyer, they managed to bring a case to court. And the case ultimately came to me, and we started building a team and building the case, and we got all the way to the Constitutional Court. And ultimately, you know, other NGOs joined, and they brought broader issues before the court around the rights, for example, of adopting parents. The important part for today's purposes is that the outcome of the judgment, I thought, was a very good one. It was a judgment where the court was trying to marry the interests of all these different parties. It wasn't just about the Van Wyks and the simple gender equality or gender discrimination case that I thought we were bringing to court. But the reaction to the judgment, for me, was fascinating. The reaction to the judgment, I listened to the radio the day the judgment came out, and I heard women saying, I can't believe this. Now they even want to take maternity leave away from me. And I heard men saying, what? Now they want me to stay at home with my children. Like, what is going on in this country? And, you know, I think, yeah, there were people from kind of a Zulu king down to ordinary South Africans saying this was outrageous. And what I wanted to say was, no, you're misunderstanding. All the court is doing is giving you a choice about how you as a family structure your child rearing. That's all. We're not forcing men to stay home with their children and raise their children. We're not forcing women to give up their maternity leave. We're empowering people to make those decisions and to think about whether as a man you might want to stay home with your child. As shocking a proposition as that might be. One of the arguments I made at the time was you don't have to worry that this is going to have such a kind of floodgates concern, because men generally are not going to want to stay home with their child, let's be honest. But the point is that the law rectified the discrimination on the basis of gender. Now we have to work on society to change that. So that for me was kind of an easy case with an outcome that I had not expected. The second area I want to talk about is sexual harassment. And increasingly in the last few years, I have just had so many cases around sexual harassment, either where I'm asked to chair a sexual harassment inquiry at either a public or private employer, or where we're litigating around sexual harassment. And the thing that strikes me is that it is so blatant, it is so prevalent, that there is, you cannot say that sexual harassment in South Africa only happens in a certain kind of context or to a certain kind of person. It is across the board, irrespective of race, of class, of employment status. We're seeing an increase in complaints around sexual harassment. And so I've been asking myself, why is that? Is it perhaps because more women are, and it is most often women that are sexually harassed. It's not always, but it is most often women that are sexually harassed. Is it because women are more aware of their rights? Is it because women feel more empowered because there are policies in place to come forward and exercise their rights? Maybe, that may be part of it. But I'm also concerned that there is this increase generally in sexual harassment in our workplaces. Last month, the Johannesburg Bar had a magazine called The Advocate, and they published a survey that they had done across the Johannesburg Bar of sexual harassment. The results were astounding. The results and the stories that women were telling of their experience at the bar of sexual harassment were deeply concerning and kind of really quite extreme forms of sexual harassment in a space where we as lawyers know the law. So we know that what is happening is illegal. We know that it's wrong to behave in this way, and yet men are still doing this at the bar. We know that this happens in our judiciary. I've just been litigating a case for most of this year around a complaint by a judge's secretary against the most senior judge in that division. Bar rules preclude me from talking about the specifics of that case. I won't go there. But I want to talk about the lessons that I've learned from representing a complainant in that context. I think we need to ask ourselves, we have these wonderful policies in place. So we have to ask ourselves as men and as women what we're doing ourselves to implement policies to stop the way in which we think about what we are entitled to do. And as a woman, to think about how we respond to sexual harassment when it happens, and how we empower other women by giving them strength to take them through a process where, for example, they have to complain. In the case that I was talking about, that's presently before a judicial tribunal, we're waiting for a ruling. My client is an incredibly strong woman. She managed to bring this complaint, to find herself lawyers through the Women's Legal Center, and to follow through in a very public way, telling her story. But the case itself captivated South Africa. It was live streamed. This new thing of broadcasting our cases is another interesting topic for a day when I don't have a time limit. But the case was interesting because it captivated South Africans. It exposed our biases and our prejudices, our stereotypes about what we think of women who find themselves in this position, what we think of men, and what we think our cultural norms prescribe and permit. And I think there's a lot that we'll find coming out of that case that we'll want to engage and should engage more about as a society, and how we reconcile all of these different things. But the lessons for me coming out of that case is, one, as society, what we need to do is we need to create mechanisms to support women who come forward to complain. And in this case, we had the Women's Legal Center who, without much funding at all, managed to put together a legal team and to carry this thing through for a number of years. And it may still go forward. But the point is that it's important to fund our NGOs. It's important to fund our civil society organizations. And we know, I sit on the board of some of them, they are critically compromised by a reduction of funding worldwide, particularly because of the nature of the work that they do, because of what Mark is talking about the conservative creep. So it's important to focus on those organizations and empower them, fund them, so that we can do training, that we can litigate, because litigate's not always the answer, but training is and education is as well. What we experienced as a legal team was, although we were all attorneys and I was the advocate, we needed to support our client in a way that a psychologist would have been better placed to do. we needed to be able to think in broad ways about what she needed to get through this process, and the intersectionality of all those things. I also realized the role of the media in this process, because this became such a sensationalized thing that it was all over the media, and the responsibility of the media in how you report about human rights issues is critical. It's not just about being sensationalist. It's not just about picking up on what is on TikTok. It's actually about educating the public and making them think about the issues in responsible ways, and not to just feed into stereotypes and prejudices. And then the role of the public. What we saw in that case was that our complainant was almost victimized a second time through the media. And, you know, we had on Twitter, on TikTok, on YouTube, comments about how she looked, about her body, about the way she spoke, about her voice, about how she dressed. And that wasn't even comments about, you know, the facts of the case, how she chose to behave in a particular situation, but it was really an attack on her as a woman. And it reduced her, as sexual harassment does, to just a sexualized being. And, you know, as women, we know we walk around with our sexuality. You can't ever leave it. I can't stand here before you as a lawyer. I'm always a woman lawyer. And it's something that has struck me throughout the sexual harassment work, that this is a battle that we have as women. And so we as women need to think about what we are able to do to take control of that. And as I say, it's for a longer conversation. I'm just sort of dipping into things that will require more thought. But I think, you know, it's important as members of society that when we look at these kinds of cases, when we look at issues around gender, for example, not just sexual harassment, teenage pregnancies, these are our sisters, these are our daughters, these are our mothers, our wives, and it's not just a woman's issue. I keep saying this, these are not just women's issues, they are human issues. So men have a role to play in how we shift society to a more equal space. And employers have a role to play in how we force that conversation to shift as well. So at the end of the day, both of these cases show me that even where you think, you know, in the Van Wyk example, we had a great fix, we had an outcome. At the end of the day, we need to do more. We need to work together to change society and then use the law to change society. And what's really important is forums like this, where we can discuss, debate, and lay the seeds of thought that hopefully you will go away with and think about in your different spaces, and come up and be the activist that Mark calls on us to be. So thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you, Nasreen, for that really thought-provoking stuff. It's even difficult to hold you disciplined to time, because I myself am completely engrossed in what you are talking about, and your parting shot, I mean, reminds me when Sidi Madia passed away not long ago. I actually went through our chat and our long chats, and one of the things that she was quite keen on is this idea of a media lekgotla. We need a media lekgotla of sorts, where the media reflects quite honestly on itself, its positionality, its agenda setting ability, and so on. I've had a few people now over the Matlanga Commission, for example, asking me, what is the agenda of this publication? Because it's quite clear there are anti-Mkwanas. And why do they report like this about this political party? Who's feeding them information? And then, of course, bumped into somebody, I won't name him by name, in the SANEF universe. I said to them, I see the statement you've released about, you know, if people have information about journalists who receive brown envelopes must come to the front. But we all know Madala side, the problematic ones in the industry. They're there. And we agreed that this is the case, and we need to find ways to debate these issues, what do you lead with as a headline from the kind of hearing you were talking about, which was quite really seriously disturbing, even some of the videos, but you could see the power of patriarchy in that hearing very seriously. In 2011 or so, I once met one of the editors of the Sowetan, and I said to them, I'm going to write a very bizarre piece for you for Women's Day. And so we workshopped this piece. She said, no, there's no way you can publish that thing. So eventually I wrote it and I sent it to her. She said, okay, we're going to publish it. And I was trying to test the idea of from the bedroom to the boardroom, and whether or not you can achieve women emancipation in the boardroom if they don't have emancipation in the bedroom. I won't go into that piece, but it's a serious thing that I've been working on in my mind for the last 15 years, because I view it as a very critical issue, because you're quite correct. A man is not oriented to see an equal, is not culturalized to see an equal, and that's why there was that brouhaha over that judgment. People didn't care about the facts. No, why must I stay at home? I celebrated it because, I struggled because my son was born a month preterm, and I suppose we're doing this storytelling so that we're not talking about other people's stories. We're talking about real human stories. So he was in neonatal ICU for 21 days. I was at Power FM at the time. My show was starting at 9 a.m. I had to leave home early to take frozen breast milk to Olivedale Hospital. And I had to drive all the way back to Houghton at Power FM. Then after my show was done at 12, I had to go for the 1 p.m. visit, get home, take a nap. I had to drive the mom for the evening visit for her to breastfeed and spend time. Every day did that for 21 days. It was the most bruising 21 days of my life. So yes, you want me to say if I can take some leave? Of course I'll take some leave, because it's just an impossibility to work around. Of course, then the other one was about the surnames. Mina manje Mr. Dlamini from Mr. Mnguni. No. But again, the court is simply saying if you want to do it, you've got the choice and freedom to do it. It's no longer automatic that it's only for women. Home affairs system is actually interesting. You get married immediately, your surname is changed, and then now you have to rechange it to a double barrel or your surname, and it's an administrative process. So I think the law really does help us to develop some sensibilities within the legal instruments and, of course, the general instruments that we have put in place. But I really think that your parting shot is an extremely serious thing. Like you said, GBV now flows out of our mouths, sexual harassment flows out of our mouths, and of course in the workplace now you find people saying no, but it also depends who's doing it to them, and then these are the debates of technicalities of consent, right? You see somebody hugging another and tapping them on the head, you think now next time you can come and hug them and tap them on the head, and you don't understand what's happening. What I'm going to do before we get to the innovator, she's a very dear friend of mine. I don't think the organizers knew that. I'm sure they would have tried to separate us. As I said, I've stayed in KZN a very, very long time. I've worked with her father. I know her siblings. Probably met the whole family, actually. But before we get there, are there two just quick burning reflections? Now, you're not the speaker, okay? I'm going to manage you. Just two or three quick burning reflections from what we've had. It's been a long morning. I want to sort of regain the energy of the room. I've got a hand there, one. Do I have another hand somewhere? Okay, I have one hand for now, so nobody manje must pretend like Hingati I didn't open up the floor. Just introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Sibongi Lendashe. I come from an organization known as the Initiative for Strategic Litigation in Africa. We work across the continent on holding states to account. I want to talk about South Africa and two things. There is the jurisprudence of the Constitutional Court over the past 30 years on gender justice, and I think as we move forward, we have to ask ourselves the question, what has it been able to do to change the gender-based violence that we continue to see? I am developing a critique around it, and what I see when I look at the jurisprudence is the kind of questions that the court has been asked to address, which have mostly been tinkering. So when we talk about impact of the Constitutional Court, is law and policy change, you know, so we are infusing common law with the constitutional principles, and we are saying, yes, the state can be held accountable under these circumstances. But this does not necessarily trickle down. It's normally just a remedy for the individual concerned because those cases don't necessarily come back, you know, to court again. And so the jurisprudence changes, something changes in the law in terms of legal principles, but not necessarily that impact does not go down. So I think there's a distinction that we have to make around what the court is asked to do and what is the impact, you know, on that. So when you look at maybe cases like inheritance where women were not allowed to inherit under customary law, and then when that provision is struck down, and then every woman who was precluded because of that is able to then benefit and is entitled to inherit. But the jurisprudence on gender-based violence doesn't actually do that, right? Because that's not how those claims are framed, and it's not necessarily possible to do that. So when you begin to look at this, you begin to see race and the refusal to pay attention to intersectionality in South Africa, because there has been this idea that it's not a real thing. Look at these cases and you're going to see that black women aren't necessarily there as claimants in most of the cases on GBV. When they appear in court, they appear in criminal cases as victims, you know, because you have the partner or the state wanting to change a law because something has happened to black women. And this is about legal empowerment and access to resources. Who is able to take cases that may shift this kind of structural, you know, challenges that we have. So we don't have cases, for example, that speaks to poor policing that many black women are subjected to in townships, right? Coming to the court because of access, you know, to justice challenges. So I really do think that I came to the Constitutional Court a few weeks ago, and there was a case which has been said to be landmark that I see as repeating these patterns, this case on consent, you know, in rape cases. But one of the most difficult things to listen to and to watch when one of the court judges was asking is, how often do we see these cases in court where the judge does not convict because there is a belief that someone has consented, this kind of reasonable belief, the issue that was taken before the court? And there was no research done, there was no kind of evidence, you know, that was presented before the court to say, if we actually get the court to issue this decision, this is how we are going to change society. We will see convictions go up. We will see all of that. So these cases become like moments, you know, for lawyers to come with their legal kind of arguments and say, this is a problem, you know, with the law, and this is how the law has to be changed. Because there were many groups, you know, with asking the court to do different things as remedies for this problem. But the question was, when the court has remedied this legal question, what impact will it have on the experiences of GBV, whether in the courts or outside of the courtroom? So I think these are some of the questions that we would have to ask ourselves from today, that if after 30 years we are looking at this jurisprudence and we are saying it's here, but it's not transformative because the court is not being asked to issue transformative remedies because that's not the facts that are before the court, and then to try and get those cases to the court so that the court can have the jurisprudence that's capable of causing the changes that we so need.
Thank you very much. This is what happens here. Once you say hands, the one goes up, then the ice is broken, then I'll give you one more and then we carry on.
Good afternoon, wonderful people. We are all women until race, religion, and gender divided us. I just want to take this opportunity and thank the Office of the Her Excellency Minister Mamulu Kukubai, the office Bo Ntate Sibia for inviting us to this network. We are actually here we are a group of people from Meadowlands, and there's a team, wonderful team here with the different NPOs, and we say we were very happy to be part of this program, and next time don't leave us out. And to the wonderful people here, we are saying this is part of our network, because our banning issue, we are banning in terms of the dispossess of the people from one area to another. I'm speaking about forced removals. We want to make sure that forced removal is an issue that has to be taken into account, because it's part of the Section 29 and Section 27 on the Constitution. So from Sophia Town to Meadowlands, on the 9th February 1955, people were dispossessed. Their rights were trembled. So we are saying this is one issue that has not been taken care of. So we are banning on that issue and saying we want to collaborate with these wonderful people, activists, NPOs, and everybody, lawyers and advocates and everybody who indeed wants to. So we will be networking. Don't mind us if we network with you, so that we are able to say we invite you to come to Meadowlands, because this issue is very important. Forced removals happened everywhere, and this issue is not being attended in due course. So we are here for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just shutting you down because you've reminded me that there needs to be time to network. So therefore, the thing that you are here for will happen if I save some time from you so that we are able to do it. But indeed, very, very serious issues. There's an old lady, former mother of a former boss of mine in Kabeja, and she's now in her 90s. She says, I'm not dying until I get my house back from forced removals. I'm going to be here until I get my house back. And now her house is a B&B. She says, it's even more value now. It's fine. As long as they just bring it back, I am not dying. So, and I mean, the pace at which, I mean, I know colleagues at the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development are quite seized about these matters, the speed of land claims courts, the capacity, this and that, you know, the loss of, I'm not putting you on the spot, DDG. I'm just simply saying, I know you are seized with these issues. Now, the person I'm going to call is a creative. The best person who would probably introduce her is Dr. Ruel Koza. Who once called her a creative, and because she's a creative, therefore she's an innovator, and because she's an innovator, therefore she's an edutainer. And that was when she launched her book, South African History Retold. It was quite an interesting book for me because I'd gotten a bit irritated as somebody in Durban. I mean, I still call it West Street, Smith Street, Pine Street, so that's how you know how old a person has been well acquainted. Nasreen, as you studied there as well, a person knows how well acquainted you are with Durban, is when you still know where Field Street is, and it's not whatever new name it is. So then Ketiwe was clearly quite intrigued by these names and went on a journey of trying to write a story about each and every one of those new streets. I got to know about Betham Kize and all of these people, really remarkable women who did things in their communities that were, and then of course she then took it a step further, developed a board game to help us have conversations about our history and so on. And actually, then we asked her to be a sounding board to our board game for voter conversations last year ahead of the elections. So, Khethiwe Zulu, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Although I've been called an edutainer and all of the other names, Lukhona, I also was just irritated. So it just came with it when I eventually launched the books. But thank you very much for having me here. It's an extraordinary experience to be in the same room as everybody that is here today. And I thought when I heard the topic, Human Rights Daily Essentials, how lucky I am to live in a country that's already spearheaded this type of work to try and literally change the street names so that history doesn't live in the archives, but rather lives in our everyday walks of life and becomes our everyday essentials. The work of reclaiming public spaces is something that I think was necessary for this country. But once again, I must say, I now speak fondly of it, but at the beginning, I really was irritated. I just learned to drive, so I just learned the street names that existed. Now suddenly, I'm seeing problem keys. I'm like, they're putting problems in street names as well now. Like the depth of my disrespect for the people that were in the street names because of my lack of knowledge. Now, I've been humbled to realize who they were. And I also realized how much I lacked the knowledge of the human rights that black and brown people are not afforded in the country, just because I had not been taught them. You can't appreciate a history you haven't learned. I went to an all-white, multiracial school when they were still called Model C. And the history I was told didn't place me anywhere. It wasn't contextual. I was sure Jan van Riebeeck, but I was also learning about World War II. I didn't place myself anywhere in the history that I was being taught. And I thought when the street names got changed, perhaps let me just take a moment to try and find out who the people were that were in the street names. And in that journey, I was deeply, deeply humbled. I started to do the project for myself at first. For me, I didn't aim to publish a book about the street names. But when I learned who they were, I was getting into people's cars just for rides to show off what I had learned. Did you know? Did you know? My friends started to call me chappies. Did you know? Because I was, as people were driving, I was telling them about the street names. But when that was happening, I realized how many people like me didn't know. And as a result, I decided, no, I'm going to publish this book. Because in it, I had even learned why some street names are named the way they are. I learned in my own neighborhood, there's a street called Rick Turner, and that he was a UKZN, University of Natal lecturer who died in the arms of his child because he was shot by the apartheid police. I learned about Ruth First. I didn't even have in context that there were many white people who fought for liberation. I just thought it was a black project. I learned about Ruth First, whose hands were blown, and she died because she was sent a letter bomb. I learned about Phila Ndwandwe, and at that time, I had just become a mother. That's how late I learned my history. I learned about Phila Ndwandwe, who left a 2-month-old child. I was holding a 2-month-old. There's no way I was going to leave a child to go and fight for people's rights. But the humility of learning of a mother who left a child behind and went to fight. I learned about my favorite character called Annie Silinga, who said, I will never in my lifetime carry a passbook, a dompas, which was called back then. She was imprisoned up to 4 times, Annie, for not carrying a passbook. She went to her death having never carried a passbook. And I thought, if our children can learn about the resilience, about the tenacity of the people that came before them. If our children can learn about where they come from, perhaps they can be what Mark called today, powerful people, because we are powerful people once we know where we come from. So I decided I'm going to launch these books. The first one is called South African History Retold, and it's the history behind the street names. And it's got 156 street names from around the country. When I launched this book, I was asked, where are the women? Now, the thing is, I didn't write the street names. But the attack was like, you didn't write about women. So I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. I commit today that I'm going to go and research. And I found 110, largely unknown females of the liberation struggle. And I launched that book again and called it South African History Retold, the history behind the women in the struggle. Then when I was sitting, I was like, no, man, I'm Zulu. And history shouldn't be a privilege of linguistic privilege. Let me translate this thing, but I'm only Zulu, so I translated it to isiZulu for now. My dream is to translate the entire project into all 12 official languages of the country, but that takes a while. And I'd just like to explain a little bit about how the books are written. I didn't want to write a history book. I wanted to write a reference guide. My books stay in my car, in my cubbyhole, because sometimes as I'm navigating the streets, I forget who the person is. And I'm like, yank it out, and I read about who the person was, and I once again, just remember as I'm navigating my street. I wanted the language to be accessible. Each entry in the book is 2 paragraphs long. It's not something that you're going to be reading all day, but it teaches you who they were with their contribution in the struggle and how they died, just so that you become familiar with the people that came before us. And I wanted it to be, that's why the topic today resonates so much with my project. I wanted it to be a daily essential, something that you can carry in your backpack, in your, whatever it is that you are traveling in. A student told me that as she's traveling in the bus in the morning, she has it with her, and sometimes she looks at the street names and she pages the book. I was very happy to hear that. Then I thought to myself, no, man, not everybody likes reading. So what else can I do? Because I was getting excited about the information I was finding out. What else can I do to make this history accessible? I grew up on Scrabble. My father is a Scrabble fanatic, and because of that, we learned many things. We learned how to spell, we learned how to take turns, we learned how to listen, we learned how to memorize, and I thought I'm going to turn this into a board game. I turned both books into a question and answer board game. And because my friends called me, did you know? I named it South African History Retold, Did You Really Know? And I wanted, I'll just explain a little bit before I tell you how the game is played. I often get asked, am I ever going to digitize the game? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to digitize the game because digital games teach information. I wanted a game to teach connection. And because of when I was developing the project, I learned about the history in my own home that I didn't know, because we sat around the table. I was still testing the game back then. We sat around the table rolling the dice, and my dad would suddenly spin a story. Well, he wasn't lying. He'd tell a story about, oh, do you know that I used to write extensively when it was during apartheid? I didn't know that. My sister said, do you know that I was thrown in prison as a student activist? And my mom said, oh, you know those bowls that I used to keep around the house? It was in case police threw tear gas. I wanted to douse you guys with water. Rich stories that form the fabric of our history that wouldn't have ever come out had I made the game digital. So the game is never going to be digital. It's meant to be played around the table by people who can share stories generationally. So how the game is played. You'll also be able to, if I can just have the board game shown up, but it's also on display outside, so you can, as we wait for the board game to come up, you roll the dice and you get on start. But you are not allowed to start the game until you've answered a question correctly. So you qualify to be in the game. And I kid you not when I say I have played with numerous groups when people have been outside the game as others navigated the game because they didn't know the qualifying question. Just sit outside until somebody wins. As you navigate the game, you land on color-coded spots, and they tell the referee which question to ask. So when, where, who, and general knowledge questions are in the game. And the general knowledge questions are called AISH, purely because when people were playing the game, when I was still testing it, they were first called general knowledge, but this happens so often I changed it. Whenever they heard the answer, they'd be like, AISH. So I changed the general knowledge questions to AISH, and they are deliberately called this because when grounds players in the timeline of our liberation struggle, showing that every right we enjoy today was earned through specific moments of courage, what grounds us in factual clarity, you have to know the right that is violated, what it was. Where roots history in physical space to tell people that injustice happens anyway, in communities, in regular spaces. Who restores dignity and reminds us that the people who died for us were not faceless. They were individuals with homes, with families that were loved. And the general knowledge questions just teach you about the history of South Africa, and they are the only questions that you are not going to be able to answer by reading the book. It's just general knowledge. And what else I learned as I was doing this project are some fundamental things, that our history, our liberation struggle was not only local, it was continental and global. People internationally marched and died for us to gain our freedom. I learned about sanctions, the things that Mark was talking about. How do you boycott? How do you make sure that you take away money from the pockets of people who are not dealing in humanity? I learned about struggle icons that were from the continent that opened their doors to us, and today we see a surge of xenophobia. Had our children known who else liberated us, would be far more humble as human beings when we say people must go. And I learned about the duty to give back. And what started to sadden me is that if this history is not taught properly, we run the risk of the youth we have today who are not interested in political discourse, in being part of political conversations that changes their lot, just as the youth of 1976 did. We are left with daily essentials that mirror the apartheid ones, where you were written whites only. Those were their daily essentials. From this project, I wanted to flip the script and give our children daily narrative, daily essentials that belong to us and that belong to them. And I wanted these tools to belong in the classroom so that they can page through their own history and play it as they learn. But mostly whenever I add new questions and answers to the game, and as I research about the history, I start to think forward. I think about the daughter I brought into this world, what I want her to take away from this. I wanted to know that she may be an ordinary child, but she can be extraordinary in her choices. I wanted to know that in the greed and corruption we see, there are people who died for her, not knowing the world they were going to see that is free, but they died anyway. I wanted to be part of political conversations that make the world a kinder place, and I wanted to learn to speak up against injustice. I wanted to use my tools, my history game, and my history books as her daily essentials, and to understand that the giving of history is almost like a race. Somebody hands you over the baton, and you have to choose to sit or run. I wanted to say Mommy ran, and when it's her time, I wanted to run too and take her generation with her. Thank you.
How beautiful are all those things? And I must say her daughter is actually a very good artist, probably following on the mommy's creative footsteps, but just albeit differently. You know, as you are talking, Ketia, you remind me of one of the youngest prisoners in Robben Island, around the sense of, you know, agency and liberating your own self. If you read former Deputy Chief Justice's book, My Own Liberator, Dikgang Moseneke, just read those first 3 chapters of that book. I mean, it just does something to you, man. It just moves you. Here was a 14-year-old who had clear, abiding agency about what he wanted to do for his community, his country, aware of his own privileges, went on to get arrested at 15, got to Robben Island around 16, and spent 10 years there, educated himself during that period, went on to be one of the most amazing silks in this country, and of course became the Deputy Chief Justice of the very same Constitutional Court here. So there's something profound about what we are talking about today, looking at these personal stories and what do they mean and what is it that we are trying to get ourselves out of and into. And it seems as if, of course, the world, as Mark reminded us earlier, whilst it has changed, it has not changed as much. And I'm always, perturbed by this 1948 year because so much was happening. As you spoke about George Orwell, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights was being adopted, and apartheid was actually starting here in this country. So the world has always been in flux and pulling in different directions. And I think whilst we may be anxious, whilst we may be nervous and uncertain about what's happening, I said to a friend, I think it's difficult to live through history as it is happening. It's one thing to hear about it. It's another to then just live quite a quiet life and go on. But I think it's difficult to live through history because I think we are going through history in this moment. And I think of my late grandmother. She died at 94 in May. And I think, she was born in 1931. She saw it all. World War II, she would have been 14. Apartheid, she would have been 19. And then seen the democratic transition, seen the corruption of the current government and, demise. So I think I take inspiration in that knowledge that the world has always been pulling in different directions. And there's no doubt we are seeing a reformation of the world and a reformation of global institutions. Across the peacemaking ones, the human rights ones, the security cluster ones. And I think we're not going to have a good world to live through in the next 4 to 10 years. It's going to deliver a lot of things for many of us. Before I call our entertainment, and then we're going to get a closing remarks from Abigail, is just to say, sometimes you just have to do things that are within your agency. So my last trip to DC was actually 4 days after the inauguration in January. And I have never seen DC in that way and so securitized ever since I've been traveling to Washington. Luckily, my visa expired in February and I'm not renewing it until 2028. Let's have our entertainment for, give us a piece, Well, Mike.
Yeah. So we are between lunch. We'll make it quick.
The city is burning down. The city is burning down. The city is burning down. When the man were burning, their wives' mouth became wood fire. Their hearts, a burning dry forest ready to burn beyond recognition. The soil, an accomplice who had too much to drink with petrol the night before. Reborns are for those ready to breathe again. But we are dead here, in the hands of a lover. Patriarchy has clenched its fists, disguised as an intruder in toilet seats. Patriarchy has turned teller at the post office. Iaswa, 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 lore lore. Raramoloko wa basadi wa hwelela. Ramasedi rarlernar. Their hands are burning chimneys, and there is no smoke without fire. Ah, Swanaga. Ah, Swanaga. Yeah, Swan. Our hearts bend from both ends, extinguished with their lips. Nagaya swa, lore lore. Nagaya swa, litomutse mahlo. Moloko wa basadi wa hwelela. In this village, love comes wrapped in blankets, warming caskets. City is burning down. City is burning down.
Thank you so much. Let's give them a huge round of applause. And that is the Mu Africa wa Mukati Kiba trio. Not every day you see a trio band of women. So I think that's extremely, for me, very, very my greatest takeaway of this event. Anyway, she needs no further introduction. She's my co-pilot for the day, but now she has to give some closing remarks. Abigail Noko.
Let's give it up for Lukhona. Wow. Well, I did say at the beginning that you'll know why you stayed and you'll know why you came here. I hope, like me, you feel really, really, I have to say, I feel very inspired. So I just want to thank, you know, the speakers from this session. I really, really feel like this is why we're here. So thank you so much for bringing it to life. I had a very long speech, but I know that I'm in between lunch. No, I'm just joking. I didn't have a long speech. I'm just going to really try to wrap it up for us now. And of course, I have to start with a number of thank yous. I really want to extend my heartfelt thanks to all the speakers from earlier in the morning, to those who just spoke now, to the performers, to all of the participants, to the service providers, to the co-partners, to Conhill for opening this space, Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, the South African Human Rights Commission, and of course Lukhona for agreeing to co-moderate today. Let's give everybody a round of applause. You know, and I was just sitting there and thinking how to conclude, because there's been so much that has been said. So I'll just wrap it up in really 3 very quick things. I think while I was sitting there, I was left thinking to myself, and so where do we go from here? And so I thought I would reflect back on 3 very key salient points. I think the first one for me would be that we must be reinvigorated to continue the good fight. And I want to share a few snippets of the things that people said. These are not my words. We must learn and reimagine. Organized good is better than organized bad. The law must be about people. So I really think this idea of reinvigorating our energies to continue the good fight is really important. The second is we must do some soul searching to better understand what it is that we did well and where we went wrong. People are more powerful than money. If we don't understand our history, we can't understand our present. And the third and final one for me is we must never give up in reinvesting in people. There is power in solidarity, there is power in marching, there is power in collaboration. We are extraordinary in our choices every day. So let us choose to be that person that says, "Mommy ran, now I'm running too." So with that, it brings me back to just say that the reason why we were here was to commemorate the signing of the Constitution today, and International Human Rights Day. So we must be reminded that human rights are not distant ideals. They connect us, they solve problems, they anchor our dignity, and they truly are the soul of life. It is incumbent upon us to recommit to keep that flame alive, to ensure that human rights remain the foundation of our shared future. So let us never, never, never give up, because human rights are worth fighting for everyone, everywhere, every day. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Final housekeeping announcements. Before we part, I really encourage you to connect with one another. There's lunch that's going to be served in the atrium. Meet somebody new, start a new conversation, but also interact with some of our interactive human rights engagement activities that we will have there. We have artworks from a number of artists that I believe are in the room: Jason Langa, Ketumelo Mamabulo, Serena Moodley Anderson, and Sinalo Ntuli. So please do take the time to engage, have a bite to eat, connect with one another, and spread the word that human rights matter. Thank you so much. And for the speakers and the co-organizers, if we could just come to the front to take a picture. Thank you so much.
Okay, as the speakers are coming up, please do. I have been given one last announcement to make, that the Imbilo Collection Foundation has launched a powerful campaign initiative to confront the reality of gender-based violence in South Africa, a crisis that affects people of all genders. And this is how their story started. It was just during a routine food and sanitary pad distribution visit, a young girl made a simple yet profound request: please bring me a bra next time. That moment revealed just how deeply unchecked vulnerability runs. In response, founder Angela Young carried a bra to the summit of Mount Everest and raised it as a flag to honor survivors. The height of the mountain, 8,849 meters. Close to where lunch will be served, you will find 8,849 bra installations on display. Please do visit the installation, and lunch is going to be served where breakfast was as you exit to your left-hand side. Speakers, I thought you would be here by the time I finish, so that we are efficient on time. Ninja Niganti. Okay, we can disabuse the podium now if the photo is to come out quite well. Yeah.